Hello and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in work and life and simplify them. And friends, today's topic is all about us, the body, specifically the physical, but it might also move into the emotional and spiritual as well. What I want to talk about today leans more on the self-care side, even though that's a bit of a buzzword, let's be real. But I want to talk about how to truly listen to our bodies. It's been a crazy last year and a half for nearly every single person on the planet, and this is where I think we may need to begin. So my special guest today, her name is Irene Lyon. She teaches people all around the world how to work with the nervous system to transform trauma, heal body and mind, and live full creative lives. Now, to date, her online programs have reached over 4,000 people in 90 different countries around the world. She's got a master's degree in biomedical and health science, and she also has a knack for making complex info super easy for all of us to understand and apply to our lives. So, I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, Irene Lyon. Hey, Irene.
Hey. Hi. Hey, Mary. Hello, hello.
I'm so glad you're here. And I just want to say up front, divine timing that you and I are recording this one today, because I'll be honest, and I'm sure no one's listening, it's just between you and me.
Just us.
I'm feeling pretty depleted today. Energetically, my nervous system is probably shot. And I don't know exactly why. So maybe in our conversation, I'll just play as guinea pig and we can uncover and unpack that, because I feel right now, what I feel in my body is I just want to lay under the covers and hide and do nothing today. Ugh, how many times?
That sounds nice, actually.
Yeah. How many times have we all felt that way in various aspects of our life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, we can go down so many rabbit holes with this, but our human culture, I'm just going to say let's say Western civilization, we have gotten here by overriding and pushing and bulldozing past our feelings, our bodies. And I'm being very general here because, of course, there are some areas that are a little more in tune with the natural rhythms of the world. But usually in developed nations and in what we would call Western societies, we're industry. We're all about, if I go even back, when we domesticated plants and animals, over 10,000 years ago, the agricultural revolution, electricity, all these conveniences have pushed us into a disconnect, and this is even cliche, but a disconnect with the natural environment, but really with our natural internal environment.
Yeah.
And we've become masters at ignoring it, and that's where things can go a little sideways.
Yeah. And we put such emphasis on work and having a quote unquote super busy schedule that and I'll put my hand up first, you go, well, even though I feel completely depleted, I have to do the thing. I have to show up. I have people waiting on me and appointments booked and tasks that need answering and da-da-da-da-da. We bypass actually taking good care of ourselves, right?
100%. And I actually just did a video on this last couple months, a concept. There's a word in the mind-body healing world, or two words that we would call spiritual bypass. I don't know if you've ever come across that.
Yeah.
But what I've come to realize is that, and that happens, but what is really occurring is somatic bypass. And I'm all for being productive and entrepreneurial, because that is wired into me from a young age, being organized. And even myself, I will admit, the past year was really interesting because I wasn't traveling.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing the things that I have really been doing since my early 20s. I'm 45 now. And I had to be like, okay, there's no tropical vacation to lay on the beach. I'm not going to my favorite hot springs resort in Oregon to chill and be unplugged because I can't go there right now. I have to create stuff in my home
Yeah.
with my current environment, with my husband, who I love, and we don't hate each other, so we like being around each other. But we need to have boundaries. We have to have our solo time.
Yeah.
And I have consciously rested more when I don't think I need to. And I can tell you, Mary, that has been so not challenging, but it's been eye-opening how conditioned I am to not rest until I burn out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And fascinatingly enough, and I said to my husband the other night, I said, wow, I haven't been sick in like this whole last year and a half. And usually I'll get a little cold, I'll get a sore throat, I'll feel a little trickle of something. But because I haven't been traveling, I've been eating probably better because I'm not eating out in the same way as if I was to
Right.
travel.
Right.
I'm in my bed. I have a routine. Like I've kind of become more monk-like. But I've also seen people who have not pulled away from the online world because that's just it. So there's no separation between leaving their house and going to work. And so, anyway, that was a little bit of a tangent, but yeah, the stress can be real, and I am finding that a lot of our self-care is based on survival. Like we go into survival self-care.
Yeah, yeah. And, just as you were saying earlier, I think a lot of our creature comforts had been ripped away from us, in big ways and small ways. So as you say, the trip to the beach and the this, the that to look forward to. But then even in the small moments of working from home and not in a physical office space with your mates and your coworkers and all of those things, like just that interaction in real life not being part of your daily, weekly, monthly routine. So much of us have struggled with that. I think, myself included, of the things that you rely on that soothe your mind, body, spirit, all of that, right?
100. Oh, for sure. And I think, we're in a very unique pocket of the world here in North America, which is where we are. And we got it pretty good.
Yes.
We have food. I'm making a huge assumption here, of course, but food, shelter, basic things are occurring that, just before we started recording, we were having a little laugh about the garbage trucks running down our alley.
Right.
At least for me, it's an alleyway here.
Yeah.
And I so am grateful for those people that do that, because where my mother is from, which is what I mentioned before, there is no garbage pickup.
Yeah.
At least where her village, where she grew up in the Philippines. And I'm glad I'm here right now. Let's just say that, because there's really for me, I'm like, okay, there's no excuse. Like, how can you take care of yourself? Even though this is what you teach and a lot of what I've created was, and I'll be honest, it was by pushing a little too much in my early 30s and mid 30s, when I still was, I will again admit, a little functionally frozen in my nervous system. I was still working on my layers of trauma, shock traumas, cultural world stuff, conditioning. And for me, the last year has been a blessing in some ways, because I've really just been like, okay, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. We're not teaching any workshops. It's time to really listen and rest. And it seems funny, but it's almost like a forced rest. Like, it's like, okay, I'm going to sit even though I'm not exhausted yet. And I'm going to lay in the sun, even though it's the middle of the day and I should be doing that other email and that other email and that other email
Right.
and all those things. Or maybe I should be going and getting groceries. Like, no, I'm just going to lay here in the sun and have my water and sandwich and hang out for an hour.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that world, 9 to 5 business world, is really harsh for a human system that is meant to live via the natural world and to rest when they feel like it.
Well, and so I want to talk about that, because
Yeah.
I feel like You and I spoke earlier. We cannot heal trauma in a 45-minute podcast episode. It's
I wish
just
we could.
not feasibly possible. We can't just take it off the to-do list and be like, done. We figured out all the trauma from this pandemic and all the things, big and small. So we come to an agreement that that's just not feasible or healthy, frankly, for any of us. It's a process and it's a journey. So like the real starting point is listening to our body. And I'm so curious to learn more about tapping into our nervous system and understanding at that base level what's going on, how to integrate this into our way of living. Because I imagine no matter where you are listening right now to us in the world, your city, your country is starting to reopen. And some are opening faster than others. And here in Texas, it's been wide open for a couple of months. And I think that may be part of the that I'm feeling right now, because I think society, spoken or unspoken, wants us to get back to 120% right now. It feels like, okay, let's go, and I think that there is a lot of pressure to like just be over it and get shit done and all the things. And I think that is a baseline where we will have our conversation today, if that's okay with you.
Oh yeah, sure. Let's do it.
So talk to us first about the nervous system. Like, why is it important to focus on regulating that first rather than anything else?
Well, the nervous system is interesting, and I have to do a little mini science lesson to describe this, because I will say nervous system, and you say that when you introduce me, but we have a few nervous systems.
Yeah.
So as a real quick crash course, our brain and our spinal cord is our central nervous system, and the words give it away. It's center, it's the middle, central.
Yeah.
Out of the central nervous system comes the peripheral nervous system. And it's exactly, again, periphery. Think of peripheral vision. It comes out from the middle. And so the peripheral nervous system, think of it as all the nerves that come out of the central nervous system. They come out of the brain. They're called the cranial nerves. They come out of the spinal cord. I have 2 glasses of liquid here. I've got some coffee and some water, and I can do this little dance with them and move them. And I am using my peripheral nervous systems, and the feeling, the sensation, but the execution from my brain to say, pick up the cups and move them and show them to Mary.
Yeah.
Now, I actually don't have to say that because I'm a functional human that learned these basic skills when I was little. They're there.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put that aside for a moment. The peripheral nervous system has 2 nervous systems, or we could say two pieces to it. One is the autonomic nervous system, and then one is that one that I just did with my cups. It's the muscular sensation somatic. So like if this cup had a boiling hot water in it and it wasn't this insulated, I would sense it, I would feel it, and I'd be like, oh, I'm not touching that, right?
Yeah.
So those sensations are very important, which will tie into probably more of what we talk about how to heal the nervous system. But the autonomic nervous system, which is, again, part of the peripheral, that governs 2 things. One would be our digestion, our hormones, our cardiovascular, our flow in our blood, all the things like, again, I drink my cup of coffee, it comes into my system. I don't have to think about it moving down and trickling through.
Yeah.
Just like if there is a need to bring blood sugar into our blood, glucose, for example, the insulin, we hope, granted we're not diabetic, it pumps out without us having to think, bring out the hormones to bring the sugar in. Okay, so I made that clear. The other part of the autonomic nervous system is our survival responses. So a lot of people know fight, flight.
Yep.
And then there's freeze, which is starting to be talked about a little bit more, which is really good. But But fight, flight, and freeze, that is the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic and parasympathetic are part of that autonomic nervous system. Fight, flight is sympathetic. Freeze, and I like to call it slowing down. It's the slowing down nervous system is the parasympathetic.
Yeah.
For those that know a little bit of science, there's a buzz nerve that's going around called the vagus nerve. I don't know if you've heard of the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the parasympathetic nervous system. And so our slowing down is responsible. It happens via that main nerve that comes out of the central nervous system. It's a cranial nerve, comes out, and then it feeds through the whole body. It's one of the largest branched nervous systems, nerves in our body. So these nervous systems obviously govern everything. And we need fight, flight, right? We need it. Like if I have an accident, this is my classic example, and my artery is gushing blood, I want my system to go into shock and into freeze, into that parasympathetic slowing down in a very fast way.
Yeah.
I don't want there to be this slow, meandering, slow. I want it to just, I'm going to clap my hands. I want it for like, boom. So that my blood pressure goes down, everything goes to the core, and I try to resist bleeding out, for example.
Right. Yeah. It's
we want that.
Classic Bengal tiger kind of mentality.
Yeah.
Something horrible happens to you. You want your body to react.
React. And the tiger is a great example because that would be danger is coming to me. Oh my God, I better start running, or I better attack, or I better protect.
Right.
But then if we realize we can't do those, we shut down.
Right.
So that is a first level understanding of what these nervous systems are. Now, the interesting thing with this autonomic nervous system and the para and the sympathetic, and what we have trouble with in our current society, is we get stuck in survival.
Yeah.
But there ain't no tiger chasing us.
Right. Yeah.
And there is no gushing blood coming out of the brachial artery. And there's no need to freeze and shut down. But we, as humans, and I'm simplifying this, we trap ourselves in these survival responses. And the reason for that is multi-layer. It could be how we were taught when we were brought up, which is usually the case, because that's when we're building what is called nervous system regulation. We are not born as humans regulated.
Yeah.
This is our plight, if you will, but it's also why we're so complex. You know, you think about an animal in the wild, say a mammal, most of them come out and they're moving quite quickly. Different animals, of course, are different. You know, you watch a cow come out of a mom and boom, it's up on its 2 feet. It's shaky, you know, but it's there. And so we don't have that. When we come out of mom, we are really, really dependent on a primary caregiver, and we don't know how to self-regulate. We don't know how to slow down in that refined way. But what we do know how to do when we come out is we know how to shut down real quick.
Yeah.
And then that's where the story kind of blends into abuse, traumas, blah, 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 all those things that humans survive and live through and are subjected to based on just environments that aren't that great.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and that's so interesting that you should say all that, because I feel like this season on the podcast, more and more of my conversations are headed in this direction, really understanding what's going on in the body, in the orchestra of it all, the symphony, if you will, of you know, what's happening in your subconscious, what's happening as a response based on past stories, as you say, you know, of how to react, how to soothe, how to regulate. And, you know, if I think about my own current situation right now, selfishly, I think you're right. I think that I get the sense that I'm in sort of this survival stress mode right now. Like the symptoms I feel and have felt for this last week, are just uneasiness in my tummy, my digestion's a hot mess, my bowel movements are bleh, all of the things, and when I know that when my digestive system goes out of whack, there's something here. What are other kind of warning signs that something's not right inside your body?
Well, that's a great example because, and I'll bridge what you just said, and then I'll go into some more examples, is that our digestion really is, when we're born, our first brain. And a lot of people I've heard on other shows will say that the digestion or the viscera is the second brain. And I go, no. It's actually the first one, because when, again, human comes out of mom, they are not cognitively able to make sense of the world around them.
Right.
But they feel it in their body. If you've ever been around children that are young and don't like something, they normally don't say, "Hey, parent, I'm really stressed." They say, "I have a tummy ache.
Yeah.
I don't feel good. Something doesn't feel right, and I've got tummy pains." And that is a clear indication that the autonomic nervous system is in some way in some kind of threat response, fear response. So digestion is a big one.
Yeah.
And if we think about it, before I go into some more examples, I want to contextualize it. If our system is living in even a low level of fight, flight, freeze, and right now you are here, I can smile at you, you're going to smile. We're conversing, you know how to work your tech, you're not brain damaged, right? So you're not in high level PTSD,
right?
But there's this low level chronic survival stress happening. That is so tricky because we can actually push on in that way for decades.
It's insidious. It truly is.
Very much so.
Yeah. And
so
it feels like, for me, how it feels in my body is like a high functioning anxiety, like I'm a high functioning type A, and it just sort of rises and rises and rises up to my neck, and I can feel like that sense.
Yeah. So that what you just showed is great, because that our emotions, it's interesting because you said some subconscious a little while ago.
Yeah.
In the nervous system work that I do, it's very much unconscious.
Yeah.
We're trying to work at an unconscious level, but through the somatic physiology, which is why I gave you the example of the cups and the hotness and sensing, learning how to sense, learning how to connect. So our emotions are really sensations. So if we were to track that rising up in your throat and maybe inquire with what's going on in the belly from a very internal, we would call it interoceptive, which is just the perception of our internal environment, we might uncover something. And again, I don't know your history, and I'll just throw out the common things. It could be rage, it could be anger, it could be grief, it could be pain, it could be sadness, it could be an old memory from like ages ago that's being brought up because the stress levels are so high this week. And that mimics what happened when I was 13 and grandma died and the dog died and my parents had a divorce.
Right.
For example.
Right.
But the body is what is telling us that. So other signs, one of the more classic ones, is the immune system. So if our cuts aren't healing as well as they could be, if we're getting sick, if our sleep cycle is off, if we're waking up and we're just so tired, or we're waking up in the middle of the night in panic for no reason. So if we go through some of the other systems, tightness in the joints, muscle pain, because again, the muscular system, and if we think about our joints and our tissues and our fascia, they need blood, they need nutrition, but they also need good flow to relieve and remove the waste products. And so if our system is managing this low level fight, flight, freeze, where there's a little bit of anxiety, which we would call anxiety, but it's like push, 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 and then, I need to collapse. That is like a non-well-oiled system. I just did like double negative there, right? It's like the system wants to flow.
Yeah.
But there's this stopping there's like a dam that's stopping the flow. You put that over decades, a year, intense stress, and the joints start to deteriorate. The muscles start to lose their capacity to take in oxygen. The cells start to suffer. The hormones start to go out of whack.
Yeah.
Because all the other things are happening. I mean, I can speak fancy lingo, but I don't need to. But basically, the system's under chronic stress, the stuff in the brain that signals to our adrenals danger, it goes high on an alert, but then the system can crash because the adrenals have been pumping out so much stress chemical to keep the system alive and awake. I call it the go, 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 go. But the system can only take so much. And when it's exhausted that adrenal excretion and there hasn't been recovery and deep recovery, the system goes, no mas, I'm done. And we're just going to give you no more energy.
Yeah.
And it's a real thing, right?
Yeah. My non-technical terminology for that is hot mess express.
Love it. Love it.
You know, yeah. And I think that, you know, for me, I'm 43 at the time of this recording. I'm also probably seeing the first signs of perimenopause. You mix that, everything you've described, into perimenopause and hormone fluctuations. Poof!
It changes things.
It's a doozy.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because for women, that's another thing. If our nervous systems are off, we will have trouble with our menstrual cycles, pain. Again, think about it. There's a lack of flow. There's a stagnation. And so that's one thing. And the other thing I want to mention, I don't want to forget this, is when we are in survival stress, our cognition, our thinking, our memory, our executive function, that prefrontal cortex that creates and does equations and all that, it is hijacked by survival stress.
Right.
So the brain and this prefrontal high executive functioning area, when given space and ease and time and good nutrition and all that stuff, it just knows how to work. Mm-hmm. But then you add on the autonomic nervous system constantly fighting off supposed or real threats, perceived threats, and this is important, stored trauma that we don't even know is there, which is, I'm going to be really bold and say, most of us living in Western civilization, this higher brain can't function. And so in my line of work, we would actually say that the brain is an end organ, just like the gut. It's important, just like the gut is, but it's actually at the mercy of these autonomic nervous system responses.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I will mention, just so that we cover the broad spectrum, is social engagement. So remember how I mentioned the parasympathetic nervous system and that vagus nerve? Another branch of that is our social engagement connections. It's called the ventral branch of the vagus nerve, just based on how it comes out of the brain. But it goes to the heart, it goes to the pharynx and the larynx that produce our vocal stuff.
Yep.
It is connected with the inner ear, and it is in connection with the facial muscles. So I want to put a point in here. When a baby is born, if they don't get interaction with a face and with different sounds, hello, little one, hello, or don't do that, they don't learn this, what's called prosody, but that interaction, that engagement directly helps the heart rate calm down.
Yeah.
And so when we are under stress, we will find it harder to connect, but we will also find it harder to attune to others, and we'll miss cues. We won't understand that our child does have a tummy ache because we're so in our own stress response, and we miss it, and then we wonder why they have a tantrum, and then everything's a hot mess. Right. So the other part of this autonomic nervous system is this social engagement, which is uniquely mammalian, human.
Mm-hmm. So what I hear in all of this is that there's so much at play inside our physical bodies that we are probably not aware of 90% of it happening. You know, it is a dance, if you will, between your gut, your brain, your nervous system, all the things, right? And I'll be bold and say the majority of people in Western civilization, whether you're in the States or in the UK or otherwise listening to us, it's not like you can just stop working, you know? Like you can't just say, well, I'm going to take the next month, 6 months, a year to just get my body right, right? And so what happens is we kind of go, oh, I guess I'll push that to 9 o'clock tonight, or I'll push it to the weekend, living for the weekend, or I'll push it to a date that's unknown and that date never comes. And is that why we see such a high rate of heart attacks at 40 and obesity and cancer and all the things, right? Like, so what's your response to that, knowing that we are kind of trapped, if you will, in the way our systems and culture are set up with work? It's not possible to take a leave of absence for very long, at least certainly not in the culture of America.
Yeah,
That's
it's a
tough.
tough one. It's a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there's a lot there.
Yeah.
I would say that you are accurate in saying that this is why we get heart disease so early, cancers. You know, I'm at the age where it was only a matter of time before someone that I knew in my circles was diagnosed with some kind of terminal cancer, and it happened 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And it broke my heart. They're still around, but not well. And that person was really pushing the envelope, not resting. Signs were coming up. I don't know if they were ignoring them because, again, it was I'm not dead yet. You know, that classic, I'll sleep when I'm dead. I know
Right.
that's kind of, I hope that's going out the window because sleep, we
Yes.
now know, is so important for rejuvenation. But you're right. And here's what's so interesting is that we can actually work a lot when we have regulation in the system and we're connected to the body. I do a ton of work now that I'm regulated and can really connect to my system. But the trouble is that when we're not able to listen, we won't know when we have to take that 5 minutes to get rid of a stress response, to process an emotion.
Right.
And so there's like two worlds to this. There's the extreme where someone is diagnosed with something really, really bad, really terminal, chronic, whether it's an autoimmune condition, cancer, heart disease, or they have a heart attack.
Right.
I mean, a friend from high school had a quintuple bypass the other month.
Ugh.
And I kind of saw it coming, you know, because of the lifestyle and the stress and all that. So sometimes something is given to us, and some people do take months off and they kind of have an awakening, if you will. And it's like, I have to clean up my life. This isn't working. So there are those stories.
Yeah, because
And sometimes that works.
if you have a heart attack and you are all of a sudden rushed off to the emergency room in a hospital, then it's somehow like culture goes, oh, well, we'll give you a hall pass because we saw you've gone to the hospital. But
100%.
so many times we wait till that disaster happens, right? And that's when we finally give ourselves permission.
100%. And it doesn't have to. And that's why I think it's so odd is I often say, and I can be devil's advocate with a lot of things. It's like, well, you would take time off if you were given a cancer diagnosis, but why won't you take a week off to just rest from your client work when that's done consistently throughout the year will prevent not just that diagnosis and that in illness, but everything else that gets us as humans. And we know based on the research, specifically something called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study that got spearheaded in California back in the late 80s, when there is dysregulation in the autonomic nervous system as a result of extreme stress, adversity, trauma growing up. And if that is not dealt with and healed at the visceral somatic nervous system level, we will get sick. The data is so conclusive. We almost say I would say it's factual knowledge now. And how we get sick is dependent on our predispositions to various things, because genetics do play a part, but they express based on environment, based on what we feed ourselves, our relationships. So to go back to your question, how is a person supposed to deal with this when they can't take 6 months off to have a journey of healing?
Yeah.
There's a lot that can be done. And I know this through my work with my students, little tiny things. And this mentality of, if I don't have a full hour or if I don't have a full retreat center to go to, that mentality has to get taken out of the equation. And one of the things I've seen, I was in the fitness industry before I got into this work. I hated Mary New Year's resolution time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I only started to hate it when I was more experienced in that gym fitness world, because I would do all this work in January. People gung ho, want the new routine. I would spend all this time with them. And then and I'm being very generous here, but by March, April, it would just fizzle out.
Totally.
Even that New Year's resolutions push is an effort of survival energy. It's novelty. It's like humans need the fancy thing that just gives them a spark of excitement. And this is so cool and it's so new. And I've got this new gadget and this new watch and this new trainer and this new diet plan. And it is kind of fun at the beginning, but it's like falling in love. If you have fallen in love, there is a chemical reaction at the beginning where it's like those people are feeling it and it's amazing, but then it kind of dies out.
Right.
And the relationships that work, from my experience, are the ones that get comfortable and they love the mundane. They like the routine. They like the connection, the support, the consistency, all of that. And so what I've seen is that because we have been brought up as a sick culture, this is kind of a term in the health fields where, again, you get the diagnosis, here's a pill.
Yeah.
You have the infection, here's a course of antibiotics. You have a broken bone, you get it fixed by an orthopedic surgeon. That's important. If I have an infection, I'm going to take an antibiotic thing. If I have a broken bone, I'm going to get it fixed by the surgeon.
Right.
This other issue with chronic stress and autoimmune and all these things that are a result of survival stress being held, we have to do like 180-degree shift in how we work with those things, because it's more indicative of having a healthy diet, having a consistent movement routine, having a consistent spiritual practice, if you want to go there, because it's not something that you just do for 4 months and then you're done with it.
Right. Right.
And so this element of, okay, I know that I've got this chronic stuff. Oh gosh, maybe that's why my immune system is not so good. Maybe that's why my gut's not so good, et cetera, et cetera. It's the little things that we learn and do that add up. And it ain't that sexy. I will be honest. Mm-hmm. And I even say to my students, I want you to actually see this as just mundane, like you brush your teeth every day.
Yeah. So let's go into that for sure, because I feel like it's those micro moments that help you self-regulate, help you get back to center and get right inside your body. So talk us through a few exercises that would really help us better listen to our body and truly like calm our nervous system.
So there's a disclaimer that I put with this. Mm-hmm. So when I am in my work, we do have practices. The practices are not kind of a cause and effect thing. And the reason why is because our survival stress, so those fight, flight, freeze pieces that for many of us are stored in the system and we aren't aware of, they don't always have a rhyme or reason.
Yeah.
So I like to say it's not so much about calming the nervous system, but it's about learning how to listen to it and give it what it wants so that it can learn how to regulate.
Yep.
Now, there's two sides to this coin. And one is if one knows that they did not have solid, healthy environment growing up, the process is a little different because deep cellular safety was maybe never written into their nervous system wiring. And that is totally workable and doable, and that's what we do. But it requires, first of all, education. So while we're doing some education today, a lot more education, understanding these branches of the vagus nerve, understanding what attachment is, attunement, how our interactings with the environment are, how our defensive responses work from a theoretical level. And what's interesting is the reason why that is like an exercise to me is because of our higher brain. Humans need to understand the complexity so that when their system does something that wasn't by the book, they can be like, oh, that's that thing that Irene was talking about, where when I try to take a deep breath to calm down and I actually have a big, big anxiety attack, it's because of this.
Yeah.
Right? Or when I go to that movement class or that yoga class and I do a certain movement, tears just start streaming out of my face. If we don't understand a bit of the process behind why that's occurring, a person might feel shame.
Yeah.
They might try to stop the tears. They might think they're crazy because you're just doing a back bend or a stretch, and all of a sudden they feel tears, or maybe they feel rage and they want to like strangle the person next to them. And then they think something's wrong with them mentally. And it's like, no, that's that old survival stress coming out because you just opened up, say, your hip joint that got broke when you were 5 and you didn't like the doctor because he was really mean to you. I'm just giving these little examples.
Right.
So the theory is super important. I have to just lay that ground. The other couple things that are doable just in the moment is, I call it following impulse. And by impulse, I mean biological internal impulse. So we talked about digestion a little bit. When we start to listen to our internal organs, it is an entryway into working with the autonomic nervous system.
Yeah.
Because they're governed by the ANS, the autonomic nervous system. So this is going to sound really basic, but can you listen to the fullness of your bladder? And when you have to go to the bathroom, whether it's to urinate or have a bowel movement, do you do it? Or do you wait and wait and wait until you are bursting and the organs are actually under distress, and you run, that kind of thing. So as small as that is, if we can start to listen to those really cute and things, we start to connect with our body. And a lot of the world of movement and mind body is more grandiose movements and postures and poses. And I'm like, can you feel your bladder?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you
Well,
feel your, can you burp without saying, excuse me?
yeah. In that, that's interesting that you should say that. How many times have we all sat at a desk because we're trying to hit a deadline and we're like, oh, I got to pee, but oh, you know what? I'm just going to keep plowing through. We've all done it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious if when you do listen to your body and you do go to the toilet when you need to, right at that moment, and you do it with consistency, are you also sending cues back to your body that, hey, I can trust you.
Yes.
I can trust that you are listening to me and giving me what I need and all the things as well, right?
100%.
Yeah.